Good afternoon, everybody. Thoughts and considerations when painting, and the topic is quite involved. It's called strategies, and I started writing strategies out. I came to the 10 Commandments, and I just kept adding on to it because there's just so much involved in understanding and knowing what to do and how to do it when you're painting. So I'm going to start off right from the get-go and maybe talk a little bit about myself and my own personal experience when I was growing up liking art. I grew up in Thunder Bay, which is a very isolated town. There were literally no art galleries or museums, and there weren't even artists in town that I knew of that were selling their work. I hate to beat up Thunder Bay, but it was a great place to grow up and afforded me, walking the shores of Lake Superior and downtown Port Arthur to do portraits. And I did have not a bad art education in high school, which eventually grew into going to the University of Guelph. But going off to the University of Guelph, I literally was self-taught, and my mom recognized my interest in art and got me lessons from her friend, and I like to mention her name, Barb Coslet, who would take me into her house on a Saturday, and I painted in her kitchen, and she was wonderful. She taught me some techniques, but more importantly, she taught me the foundations of what a painting is and what a painting could be. And one of those early learning curves was, if you don't understand something, then look at it and study it and know the world that's around you. She would always ask me every Saturday, did you do your homework? And obviously being 14, 15 years old, I hadn't, because I'm busy riding my bike and climbing mountains and building forts, and it just wasn't on my mind. And then one day I had a revelation, and I remembered that this is what I had to do. And to this day, that was such an important piece of advice. I still honor her request every day I look at something. I drive a Nissan Murano, and if you see my orange Nissan on the road, pull over to the side of the road, because I'm not watching the road. I'm like the worst driver. I'm watching everything else going on around me, and that's just a really bad habit that I've acquired. The advice that I'm giving you is a personal journey. Every artist has their own arrangement with themselves and their mentors and teachers, and this is just my journey, and I'm giving you maybe a shortcut to learning some stuff, and you will acquire your own motivation and your own little techniques that will help you along the way. But I have like 25 little bits of interest that will help you in your search for, painting decent paintings. One of the things that I would like to share with you is some real early painting techniques, I guess, when I was young, and stuff that Barb Coslet taught me. One is, when you're just starting out and you have this interest in doing art and painting, and it doesn't matter if I speak painting, I'm talking watercolor, acrylic, or oil, it doesn't matter. Painting is painting, and the techniques are always the same, and your energy and your thought processes are also the same. So here we go. Number one, I guess we could start with, look at the world around you. If you're having difficulty painting clouds, I got that request last week. Well, I told the young lady, I said, well, if you're having difficulty painting clouds, step out of your house for 5 minutes and study cloud cover and build up those memory banks, and anytime you need to paint a cloud, you'll have those memories. I was teaching up in Aurelia one weekend to some adults, seniors, and one woman said, how do you paint trees? There's several different kinds of trees, and they're all different. They're all built differently, and they all say something different with the space and the space inside of the tree. So probably one of the most difficult trees to paint, in my mind. I don't have a lot of fun with spruce trees, but the pine tree, oh my God, that is something else. They are sculptural, and they have air holes in them. If you paint them, birds can fly through. It brings the sky and the light through, so that's my weakness. I love pine trees. Yeah, that's my go-to. So how do you paint rocks? Rocks are hard because they don't have, in many cases, they don't have repeated patterns. They're like leftover lava stones that they're, in many cases, blobs. So what you do there is you look for the rhythm, the repeated lines, the repeated textures that you could emulate and get you closer to what that rock should look like. Around here in Elora, which is where I live, we have sedimentary limestone, which I love, and we have a gorge here with sedimentary limestone, and I love painting limestone rocks because there's a rhythm there. They're like brick layered, and they take you to large amounts of hardly any layering at all, but that's a nice contrast to the systematic layering of limestone, and that's a fun rock to paint. Shale is fun to paint. If you're going to paint rock, go to the library and look up these rocks and study them and see how Mother Nature has played with them and moved them around and created a texture there that you're not going to find anywhere else. I mean, and I'm not going to candy coat it. Rocks are hard to paint. There's no doubt. Mountains aren't easy, especially if you're not living around mountains. So I tend to paint things from around here. But if I went out to BC and I'm looking at the Rocky Mountains, that's just a whole different game. I was on a motorcycle trip out there, and I had a really hard time keeping my eyes on the road because the rocks and the mountains were stunning and powerful, and every time you made a turn it was just a whole another scenario of what could be a painting or what couldn't be a painting. Every turn was a painting for me, and that was powerful. To this day I remember that trip, and I can see why people like painting mountain ranges and the trees that come off of it and the water that runs underneath mountains. It's green because it has copper in the water, and if I lived in BC, I would be painting the Rocky Mountains for sure. So again, it's depending on where you are. Understand your space, and I hope you like your space, because that's what we want to say about it. Take pictures. Get yourself a really good camera. I have a Nikon, and I have a lens that moves in and out so I can compose. Cell phones are okay. They're not great. You'd be surprised actually at the color and the detail you get. You need something that's maybe a little more professional. But I have my camera on me all the time, and I do have painted from my cell phone, and that was just a happy accident. So the cameras out there are okay. Get yourself a good 35mm digital. Another maybe bit of advice is get out of your backyard. There are paintings in your backyard. Just keep your eyes open and find things that you like. I would say start painting things that you understand and and you love. For me, it was cartooning. I love doing cartoons. I loved copying from Mad magazines and that sort of thing, and that got me going. But there is a time where you drop that off to the wayside and you find something a little more serious. Growing up in Thunder Bay, I truly enjoyed landscape and water, big water. Lake Superior was huge, it was like the ocean, and I gravitated to doing that and incorporating them. Even later on in my career, big water started to enter my subject matter. And I absolutely love that piece of subject matter. It's got an ominous, dangerous side to it, and I like that. I don't like painting pretty or candy-coated paintings. You gotta have some knowledge to paint, hang your hat on, and that's called technique and subject matter and the rules and principles of design. You gotta have that, and that's my next topic: understanding the principles and elements of design. So I found other things to paint, and in connection with that, as I was growing a little more involved in my work and becoming a little more serious, and I'd graduated university, I really enjoyed painting things that I found challenging. and I didn't want to paint mainstream. When I was growing up, Robert Bateman was doing birds and animals. I certainly didn't want to do that. That would just be copying or, riding the wave. I needed my own voice and things that mattered to me. So I did find an artist who I absolutely admired. He was such a talent, and in my mind, still to this day, he was the master of watercolor in egg tempera, and that was Andrew Wyeth from Chatsford, Pennsylvania. He changed my life. It was like Bob Dylan when I was learning how to play guitar. Lightfoot and Bob Dylan changed my life. These guys were absolute masters at their medium, and I bought every book that Wyeth put out. Betsy Wyeth wrote his books, and I just went from page to page every night looking at his work and being motivated and stimulated. So that's called mentorship. If you have somebody that you like, buy their books, see them online. Now that we have computers, you can do that. And these artists will teach you. More than words matter. It's all through example. So the whole Wyeth family, Jamie and N.C. Wyeth and Andrew Wyeth, were a real go-to artists for me. I visited their galleries 3 times and the museum down in Pennsylvania, and those were really thought-provoking trips and extremely stimulating. So what came out of that were other mentors, American watercolorists, Tom Eakins and Joseph Mallard William Turner from England, Shuptrin, who's right here. He was big when I was in university, and he was painting the South, and everything was based on texture and the things that were broken down. It had a lot of character. So that was the same time period that I started collecting folk art and antiques, because I liked the texture. And so I was collecting these things. I put them in my house. I surrounded myself with this stuff, and I found them, the imagery leaking into my paintings. I was using them for still life, and Wyeth had textures as well, and he enjoyed that. So that was my mentor, and he really changed my life, like I said. Travel and move around a little bit, go to places that you like. If you like flowers, then you should be visiting gardens, and you should be bringing your camera, know your flowers, know how Mother Nature has constructed flowers. And again, that is about foundation. So I like architecture. I have built a couple of things. I built 2 or 3 garages, and building takes you closer to structure and how things are built. And when I just came back from St. Pierre, Miquelon, there were a lot of these houses, colorful houses that I was painting. Well, I understand how they're built, so I also understand perspective. So these houses don't look wonky. They're well composed and designed, and they're like pieces of candy on a shoreline. I love it. It's just who I am now. So I'm looking for this subject matter constantly. As you're working through your actual work in front of you, I have put this together, and I teach with this when I do plein air painting. It's called the 9 boxes. And the 9 boxes, this here is a perfect square, and this is now called the golden rectangle, and it's the 9 boxes rule. I teach this when I'm teaching watercolors and oils in my workshops. This is a must. So wherever these lines intersect and you draw them on your paper, these are points of interest. So now we're getting into the principles and elements of design, and these are things that get you closer to really strong and powerful paintings. Things that should probably eventually become like breathing to you. It's like anything else. You want to be good at anything. If you want to write books, you have to know construction, you have to know language, sentence structure, and really good descriptive adjectives. And if you want to play music, you got to know all the chords. This is like the same thing. You got to know all the chords when you're painting. So line, shape, form, color, texture are the 5 major elements of design. And you hook that up with rhythm and movement, positive, negative space, focal point, which are where these 4 lines converge and one in the middle you can get away with. Probably the best painter that has ever, in my mind, that has ever lived was a total non-objective painter, and his name was Piet Mondrian, and he was from the Netherlands, and he painted real simple boxes, red, yellow, blue, and white, and they're perfect paintings because he uses mathematics to compose his paintings. When you introduce mathematics and geometry, you can't go wrong. And that's what he did. He discovered the golden mean, the golden rectangle, and he uses it over and over again. And to me, I mean, L'Oreal has adopted his design principles, and to me, they are perfect paintings. Fibonacci was a monk that discovered that even the golden rule or the rule of thirds applies to nature. You always want the viewer to look at that and go, oh, I like that. And did you know something? That a viewer looks at a piece of art and they can determine whether it works or not in 2.5 seconds. So you don't have much time there. You can spend weeks on a painting for the viewer to go in 2.5 seconds, yeah, I like that or I don't. So if they don't, you're missing something. If you carry on with my workshops, I could help you discover what that might be. I also play with light and shadow, so that's the yin-yang in painting, which is also a principle of design. And that is represented by the sun and moon. You can't have one without the other. It's in the world, it's in our universe. We have the moon, we have the sun, we have night, we have day, we have electricity, which puts out a positive current and a negative current, a stronger sense of composition when you understand yin-yang. I use it all the time. I used to do karate as well, and yin-yang is in that discipline, and I incorporated that in my art. And believe it or not, I was teaching that in high school, and I drew the symbol on the board, and the kids in class, right from 9 to 13, didn't recognize what the symbol meant, and I was totally blown away. So I would incorporate that in my lessons on how to, because it's a very strong and a very powerful process, yin-yang. So its opposites attract, light and dark, big and small, male, female is another one. If you want the viewer to look at your work and gravitate to it, these are devices that get you there so that they don't have to complicate their thought processes. It either works or it doesn't. When you are now composing and working on your design, there are things that must come into play. One of them is what brought you to the canvas, what brought you to the paper. What was it that attracted you to say, oh, that's a painting and I want to paint that and I want to have a relationship for the next several days or hours or whatever to get you to high level thinking. So this is what we do as artists, you know, there's subject matter that is, for me, now that I've been painting for probably 50, 60 years, is everything. What I choose to paint and what I want to bring the viewer to the canvas of the paper is everything. I want them to be stimulated and go, wow, that is really powerful, and I want that power. And you can get power through subtlety. I like painting fog. The other thing is, when you paint fog, whether you're bringing in powerful sunlight and shadow or fog, which softens everything, you have to have a center of interest. Well, you know what you do? You look for circles and you look for geometry, you look for zigzag lines that take you to the focal point. The Dutch taught me this when I was a student studying composition and Dutch painting. The church was really powerful for the Dutch back in the 17th century, so they would do these really long panoramic landscapes with powerful skies, and the skies would have triangles in them, and the foreground would be a farmland with it broken up with lighting and shadow, and it zigzagged back and forth, and they got closer, and guess where they ended up? They wanted to bring the viewer to the most important part of the painting, the steeple of the church. because church and church going was really important to them. It gives you, I think it takes you to a different, higher level thinking, and I still believe in that. I like painting religious subject matter because it makes me closer to God. It's just another advantage that I have maybe over others, where I find, a sunset, that's God's paintbrush. I love that, and sometimes I want to emulate it. Sometimes I shy away from it because it's just too perfect. So anyways, it's fun to try. I think I'm going to cut it off there for now. Because there's other things I want to tell you about, we're going to go to part 2, because these can get pretty lengthy and I don't want it to bore you. So I'll see you in part 2.